everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this event in the 2024 York Festival of Ideas. This event is called Eclipse and Revelation by Tom McLeish. And as those of you who have been to the festival before will know, Tom McLeish was an absolute stalwart of this Festival of Ideas. He first appeared at the festival long before he actually arrived at York University. His first appearance was in 2017 when he was a discussant after a performance by the Riding Lights Theatre Company. They did a performance for the festival of a one-act play called Faith in the Questions, which explored the relationship between science and faith through the book of Job, treating Job essentially as a scientist trying to answer the questions that God was asking him. Again, those of you that know Tom will be aware of the fact that Tom was absolutely passionately devoted to the book of Job as encapsulating the kind of relationship between science and faith that Tom dreamed of seeing, or that Tom felt was the most appropriate and the most potentially human of all the approaches to that particular dynamic between faith and science. Tom came to York in 2018. He was appointed the first chair of natural philosophy, as he was very proud of saying, the first chair in natural philosophy in the United Kingdom for hundreds and hundreds of years. He managed to get well, not so much appointments, but he had a role in a range of different departments. He was appointed in physics, but he also had office space in the Department for Medieval Studies. He was also based in the Humanities Research Centre. He had a foot I can't say he had a foot in every faculty because that would turn him into a many-legged spider, but he straddled the disciplinary field, again, as those of you that know him will be all too well aware. In 2019, he put on at the York Festival of Ideas an entire day of events. Right? These were all based around his book, which had come out in that year with Oxford University Press. The book is called Poetry and Music of Science. Most of us would, be happy just to give a talk about the book. Not Tom. Tom arranged an entire day of events around the themes that were encapsulated in his book. He drew in physicists, biologists, artists, curators, novelists, composers, specialists in 18th century literature and Renaissance literature, conductors, mathematicians. I like looking at that day because, again, for me, in many ways, it encapsulates who Tom was. He used his work as a platform to enable other people to celebrate their successes as well. In 2020, what did Tom do at the festival? Well, that was the year, of course, when we all moved online for COVID. And I think in that year, Tom performed with colleagues from the Department of Sociology and from Archaeology, so not just the arts and humanities and the natural sciences, but the social sciences as well, talking about human resilience in the face of stress and what we can learn about human resilience in the circumstances that we were then going through globally and nationally. 2021 saw another day that was organised by Tom, this time focusing on science, imagination and the big questions. And they really were big questions. What he was asking about there was, what makes humans human? How, and not just what makes humans human, but how do we relate to the non-human? How might we respond to, how might we identify alien life or life beyond the Earth? And looking in particular at relationships between science and theology and poetry. 2022, again, as well as sponsoring an event in that year on the life and the works of Clara Schumann, his focus for the festival itself, or his contribution to the festival itself, was another day, again, that he organised, looking at cosmic harmony. And there, what he was concentrating on was the work of William Herschel, basically the life and legacy of that incredibly significant figure. And again, using that focus as a means of drawing in theologians, historians, filmmakers, astronomers, composers and conductors, again, emphasizing one of the key themes of Tom's life and work, the innate unity of knowledge. We live in a university that separates us all up into disciplines and centers and whatever and what have you. For Tom, it's not so much that that's inappropriate, but that underlying all of these divisions is this inherent unity. And what Tom was again passionate about was engaging people on that shared space and in that shared space. What can we learn from each other's ways of doing and each other's ways of knowing? Now, lots of people can do collaborative research, but very, very few people can do what Tom McLeish did in creating the spaces and the places for people to see the value and the sheer joy in knowing more and in sharing what you know. And his history with this festival in particular is also just absolutely typical of Tom, because for him, it wasn't just that he wanted to break down the barriers between different academic departments. He wanted to take the university back out into the world, to take it back where it belonged, to show people who might not recognize or realize that they have something in common with each other, that they absolutely do have this shared interest in what makes the world work, and in understanding and being intrigued by and being made joyful by seeing and recognizing that engagement. By 2023, of course, he was not in a position, because of his illness, because of the illness he was suffering from then, to be able to continue his contribution to this festival, which makes it all the more wonderful that now in 2024 we can have Tom McLeish back at the festival again. I'm personally, as one of Tom's colleagues, enormously grateful to Professor Henrike Lange from the University of California at Berkeley, for putting together what I think is a celebration of the essence of Tom, and using the book that they were working on together. The book's full title, Eclipse and Revelation, Total Solar Eclipses in Science, History, Literature and the Arts. It's published by Oxford University Press and comes out this year. Using that book as a platform, the same way that Tom used his books as a platform to showcase the best in other people, Henrike is using this book to showcase what is the best in Tom. And I hope you enjoy what she's produced for us.
Let me start with a warm welcome to the audience, and especially to Tom's family and friends in York and beyond, to the entire Festival of Ideas team, and especially to Amanda, Naomi, and Craig for moderating, organizing, and facilitating this presentation. There's in fact a long list of names I'd like to read. Please see the acknowledgements in the book. Eclipses are relational events, alignments of celestial bodies in space. What makes a total solar eclipse such a rare and special event is that we find ourselves for a moment in relation to the perfect alignment of three celestial bodies, Sun, Moon, and Earth, and immersed in spectacular effects of light and shadow. The moon moves between the sun and the earth, and for a wonderful coincidence that has to do with the scale of the big sun and the small moon in their respective distances to our earth, the moon covers precisely and perfectly the face of the sun. It is quite miraculous that the sun is about 400 times bigger than the moon, but also currently about 400 times farther away. As these components, sizes, scales, and distances coincide in time and space, with first contact, the moon slowly moves in front of the sun. With the start of totality, second contact, the moon blocks the sun temporarily, and the outer atmosphere of the sun, the corona, becomes visible from Earth. The moon's shadow falls on Earth, rushing over the land as what we call the path of totality. So there was this total solar eclipse over the American continent earlier this year, and like many eclipse followers, Tom and I had been waiting for it since 2017, since the last one over America 7 years ago, when we began our collaboration, scheduling the publication of our book Eclipse and Revelation for 2024. Now, for an audience in York, and many other places in the world, truly, I don't have to introduce Tom, but I did introduce him to my students, and over the semester to many audiences on the book tours of the spring. Of course, Tom would have given guest lectures and tweeted about our book like mad. We had planned a BBC interview live from the 2024 eclipse, but in spring 2023, York Minster was filled with Tom's family, friends, and community celebration of his life and the continuation of his ideas, energy, and spirit. The years between eclipses had posed challenges that we had not seen coming back in 2017. After beginning our project at the IAS 7 years ago, we had assembled a team of authors for our volume across our professional networks. We had even been able in 2019 to enlist Jay Pasahoff to contribute a chapter on the solar corona, and he had become a good friend during lockdown. But as the eclipse community knows, Jay died in the fall of 2022. Our book is now dedicated to both Jay and Tom. As co-editors and co-authors, Tom and I finished the entire manuscript together in February 2023, and we designed our cover together so that Tom knew what our book will look like. But not only the book is by Tom, as well as for Tom, today's festival program is also for Tom and by Tom. Because this past year, I often found myself speaking in the auditorium with a screenshot from his familiar Zoom corner in the McLeish family home in York when presenting our project. For the York Festival this year, so in this format, virtually, we can continue our conversation about the book in the larger vision of Tom's cosmos, in the universe of his interests and ideas. And to hear in his recorded interviews and lectures, Tom once again speak himself about his main motivations. In 2023, Tom's final weeks coincided with the season of Lent. Preparations for today's occasion, however, fell in the time of Pentecost, a celebration of a multitude of languages. So fitting for Tom, who was fluent in French and German, spoke all kinds of other languages such as science, music, math. Tom was always such a vibrant public voice for his projects and books, except for Eclipse so far, because several of our authors' workshops had been eclipsed by the pandemic lockdown. Our conferences in Berkeley, London, and Madrid cancelled, and we were just finishing the book and starting to get the word out about the book release and planning our UK and US book launches, our Eclipse exhibitions at the Royal Society and here at Berkeley, when he had suddenly fallen ill. This is why I want to turn this evening in York in 2024 into an occasion for reflecting upon our Eclipse project within the legacy of Tom's unique presence in the sciences, humanities, arts, and theology. There was no scarcity of material when I began to look for clips to curate into this program. The only challenge was editing it down to glimpses of Tom's planetary system of books. And then you can always return to Tom's lectures and earlier York Festival of Ideas contributions on YouTube. Here are Tom's books pre-eclipse, and here is Tom in his own words in 2019 with the soft metaphysicist's surprising declaration of love to astronomy.
Please suspend everything you were once told, like I was at school, that there was no science before Newton and all that. It's all nonsense. And there's some fascinating stuff going on in astronomy. I should also say I'm a soft matter theoretical physicist. I'm also an interloper for those reasons as well. But astronomy was always my first love. It's got me into science, and I have one paper in the Astrophysical Journal, but that's for another time.
So now, just 5 years on, Tom has published a whole book in astronomy. One shortened introduction of Tom's was to say, I do all sorts of science, all sorts of places, but also intellectual history of science and science theology and medieval studies and early modern studies and present-day news and concerns and the 19th century and education and Clara and Robert Schumann, to name just a few of Tom's favorites. And an important note on vocabulary, Tom often invited audiences to think of science as love of wisdom to do with natural things. So those themes of searching wisdom, contemplation, community, oneness, reconciliation, the unity of knowledge, and the making universal of scientific communication, but also the very personal and intimate observation, contemplation, and immersion will all come up today. Having just an hour, I am structuring our conversation along Tom's main interests as expressed in his earlier books, in chronological order. We will hear Tom speak in recorded lectures and interviews. I will read a few short excerpts from our book, and I will end on the theme of the 2024 eclipse experience with a little report from Totality in April in Texas, before Amanda will join the conversation. So the themes for this evening are healing, creativity and imagination, immersion and knowledge, eclipse, and revelation. I am also presenting the book as an edited volume for the entire team of contributing authors, and I'd like to especially thank Tom's old friend Mike Frost, who joined our project in 2021 and who became, after Tom's shock diagnosis, such an important and reliable friend to both of us, for all the friendship and for stepping up into collaborating with me in the month of book production, launch events, exhibits, and book tours after Tom's passing in February 2023. The chapters in our volume, as you can see, come in 4 sections: cosmos, history and religion, arts and literature, animals, weather, environment. Written by experts from the sciences, history, arts and humanities, and theology. Tom had long considered the importance of healing the break between science and theology. And so that's the first theme. Here, with Tom's first book, Faith and Wisdom in Science, healing as in the mending of the broken relationship with nature in Tom's reading of the book of Job. And here, Tom, in his own words, in his 2021 Boy lecture, he explains how and why.
But to do so, I must make a preliminary request, which is that we all drop our notions of boundaries, the boundaries of science and the boundaries of theology, for that matter. For this disciplinary fragmentation, this sort of university territorialism, school territorialism, is part and parcel of the very early, modern wrong turns that we're trying to correct. Our disciplinary boundary making, I want to suggest, is about as helpful as a geological expedition to Antarctica, who spent all their time deciding where the political fences between countries' territories should go. And to take just one example of its effect on our field this evening, these boundaries have made us believe that science and religion questions belong within the boundaried region of apologetics. And this pigeonholing entirely misses the point that the theological consequences of the human ability to do science are profound as they are beautiful.
Similarly, Tom and I considered the beautiful corona as a profound model of gathering. For us, the corona has become a model of gathering, shared excitement, communication, and knowledge production. The purpose of our collaboration was not to produce a definite guide to the many diverse ways of predicting, perceiving, researching, or documenting an eclipse. Our work together rather aimed at further expanding the limits of perception or perceptibility, while also understanding and sharing the experience of our lived scientific and scholarly practice in dialogue. We could only offer this as one possible attempt from our shared points of view. In fact, we would like to see a whole series of books, more perspectives from more disciplines, more expansive in chronological and geographical dimensions on total solar eclipses and other spectacular phenomena. In his second book, The Poetry and Music of Science, Tom investigates creativity on the road to the unity of knowledge and explains why we need all disciplines working together.
Let's get on with creativity. Let me tell you the reason. So this is a sort of book talk, and this story fits, you're absolutely right, interdisciplinarity is my life. I've always hated divisions. I've always suspected them as being artificial. And you know, briefly, I was a chancellor for research at Durham, and what I enjoyed there very much was much more exploring bridges between disciplines than necessarily, you know, working with disciplines themselves. Who am I to do that? But I have to say that after working in interdisciplinary thinking and projects for years and years, please keep eating the crisps. I mean, no one, it won't, I'm sure the sound system will not pick up the odd crunch, and I won't be. So providing you bring a few down here for me, I don't mind at all. But I have to say, I've changed my metaphor for interdisciplinary. Oh, that's so kind. I've changed my, now this will be picked up by the sound system. I've changed my metaphor for, I didn't want you to take that seriously. Go on, send it to these people. Send it around, quick, don't do this. Yeah, that's bad, isn't it? Not working well. For interdisciplinarity, I used to think of it as building superstructures across the islands, between these separated islands of our disciplines. Lovely bridges, lovely roads, but after working between physics and chemistry, then physics and chemical engineering, then physics and biology, then physics and history and theology and English and literature, I've changed my view on this. I think the metaphor is entirely wrong, because when we get to the heart of what we know and love about our disciplines, our scholarship, our studies, our knowledge, I find that when we explore these spaces between us, rather than building bridges between us, I think we're digging down to a common foundational core. It's much more like these islands are on a planet, and the digger we deep, the closer we come together. And it's discovering the innate unity of knowledge and scholarship that we have artificially split up, rather than, as it were, sticking plaster, literally superficial idea of bridging between disciplines. I wasn't planning on saying something so deep just to start with, but it must have been the introduction that got me. Let's get on with this.
This, consequently, was how we conceptualized the interdisciplinary project in our Eclipse book. We discovered connections in our scholarship, studies, methods, and knowledge that unite rather than divide. The quest for the unity of knowledge depends on rather deep and long labor. For thorough interdisciplinary work, one needs to be expert in at least one relevant discipline first. And as in language acquisition, with each new acquired language, it gets easier to add to one's linguistic competence. Mutual respect and empathy have also been key to the desire of understanding another discipline's questions, positions, methods and instruments, data collection, and points of view. The years of working collaboratively on the theme of total solar eclipses across disciplines and fields, across chronological and geographical areas, were particularly fruitful. Their boundaries were set by the natural limitation of having started from a small cohort of fellows and expanded into our specific and already interdisciplinary professional networks. This condition helped us avoid overwhelming the book with any unrealistic expectations of completeness or full coverage. We knew from the beginning with our first panel discussion that we could not possibly press a complete global survey of total solar eclipses from all ages, places, cultures, and disciplines into one book. Being aware of this limitation, we would rather keep the discourse oscillating between broad sweeping approaches and very precise and narrow case studies, giving each author complete freedom in their presentation of the issue from their individual perspectives. They would know best what is relevant in the context of their fields and how to present it to interested general audiences. The coexistence of these perspectives with the scaled approaches is part of the method to learn from zooming in and zooming out on the topic, and to consider both the wide panorama of history, science and scientific method, theology, religion and ritual, and the unique personal relevant narratives such as those offered by historically disconnected voices, for instance, Dante Alighieri, Adalbert Stifter, and Pink Floyd, to name just a few that come up in the book. And our project's oscillation between strict boundaries as a strict brief on total solar eclipses only, not annular eclipses, no lunar eclipses, no partial eclipses, total solar eclipses only. So that strict brief combined with a total freedom of methods, approaches, and materials was not unrelated to the understanding of creativity in Tom's earlier work. Combining creativity and the science theology theme, Tom once gave a wonderful On Common Ground lecture on the continuing dance between science and theology that also encourages a wider appreciation of science.
The way I put it is that science desperately needs a new cultural narrative. If you don't believe me, tune into Radio 4's Chatter programme tomorrow morning. Listen to John Timms, whoever it is, hear the way they talk about politics or sociology or international culture, and then right at the end, about 10 to 9, Professor so-and-so will turn up and talk about a new molecule or a distant galaxy, and you can hear the clown bells jangling, can't you? It's not something for us, it's perhaps at best a bit of entertainment, but we wouldn't want to engage with this too seriously. But it wasn't always true. And it's become dangerous because another discourse or type of discourse that I think has become impoverished, as well as our contemplation of the glorious human gift of being able to gaze in to the structure of the atom or the depth of a living cell or into the spiral arms of a distant galaxy and reconstruct in our minds what is going on in that intolerably grand dynamics.
So science needs a new cultural narrative, and Tom proposed that contemplation should be at the core of its practice. This leads us to another part of Tom's Boyle lecture, which I will pair with Tom's third book for the theme of immersion and knowledge. And this is, of course, Tom's very short introduction on soft matter with Oxford University Press. And Tom discusses best practices in soft matter physics that have to do with observation, as he explains.
To remind us, it's that of the pretense that humans can really act as disconnected subjects at some sort of Archimedean point above and away from a distinct physical reality of objects. Boyle knew very well, by his experience, that truths about nature emerge from the immersion of observers in the world we seek to understand. Now, our textbooks may insist on framing science, and here the art gallery metaphor is absolutely right, a glazed image of truth held away and before our eyes. But there are lessons from the practice of science that point to a much stronger coupling that conscious observers have with the objects that they observe. Now, by now, a good fraction of folk listening to this will perhaps have detected the approaching rumble of a lorry load of quantum physics. You know, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the unavoidable change of quantum states when they're observed, and so on. But the immersed and strongly coupled nature of all scientific descriptions of the world don't depend on quantum mechanics at all. My own fortunate field of soft matter science, where quantum effects are almost never important, is full of illustrations of how much the observer's viewpoint matters. And one of the special beauties of soft matter science, and I mean by soft, I mean custards, jelly, flesh, polymers, plastics, really soft things, is its ability to distinguish between the familiar and the understood. Of course, we're familiar with the ability to stretch a rubber band to 4 or 5 times its original length and to return it perfectly unchanged. I'll do it again. But name me any other solid that behaves in a similar way. I may extend a metal wire a little. That's a demonstration I'm not going to do here. I'm a soft matter physicist, not a metallurgist. But it snaps before 10% is added to its length. Alternatively, and this is soft, so I really can do it, I may stretch a piece of clay or silly putty like this in the same way, but that ain't going to return. There's no memory of its original configuration in there. It turns out that our closest analogy to this fascinating and surprising physics of rubber is neither metal nor clay, but counterintuitively the elasticity of air, the very phenomenon that Boyle described in his momentous 1660 Oxford publication, New Experiments, Physico-Mechanical, Touching the Spring of the Air. Boyle's famous experiments are guided by the metaphor and model of a spring, whose force could be weakened by letting the gas expand, enhanced by compressing it. Now, he didn't attempt a structural explanation then about why air acted like a spring, although the atomic hypothesis was around in the air at the time in writings of people like Henry Power and others. But it was Boyle's insight into what we now call a coarse-grained or effective model or picture of the world that would be the most fruitful guide to experiment. And this is true today in our theories of rubber as well as of gases. For an understanding of why these objects are elastic or spring-like requires a very careful choice of our conceptual distance between subject and object. We need mentally to stand back from the detailed knowledge of atomic arrangements and motions to contemplate a wider picture in which the statistical behaviour of billions of molecules together is conceived of as a unit. Alternatively, we might say that the macroscopic properties, such as temperature, pressure, force, of vast ensembles of molecules are not simply the sums of their gritty component behaviours, but are irreducibly emergent. Stand mentally too close to the rubber, and all you'd see are myriads of polymer chains like this one, thrashing around thermally because of heat in chaotic, unceasing thermal motion of overwhelming complexity. But standing back a little allows the mind's eye to observe that a continually excited string tends to adopt shapes that are somewhat coiled or contorted, you see? Because these are far more numerous than the very few stretched out ones. In fact, the completely stretched, if it settles down, there's only one shape of the string that's completely stretched, many that are coiled. There we are. Again, blurring out the details of what every component is doing is utterly necessary to our compression. For Boyle's gases, it's the very rare compressed configurations of the molecules versus the very common expanded ones that produce the pressure. Here then is the rub. It's the carefully chosen ignorance of an immersed observer in the world that creates the possibility of understanding. If you want an analogy, then perhaps it's like the way we look at impressionistic art. Of course, it's possible to stand right up to a Monet and a good idea to see the delicate paintwork, but it's not the only and by no means the best way to appreciate the picture. One needs to stand back to appreciate the limpid water, the bridge of Giverny. Our modern understanding of this thing called entropy corresponds exactly to this careful choice of distance between object and subject. Now, entropy is often described as an intrinsic measure of disorder, but it's actually far better thought of as a measure of our deliberate ignorance in contemplating the system, of how many of its detailed components we choose to blur together in our mental and mathematical representations of nature. So the very concept of entropy ought to teach us that science is a relational enterprise. The glorious paradox here is that by negotiating an entropic relationship with the world, by formally choosing to know less about its detail in this way, we can arrange to understand more. Even if Laplace's famous panoptic mind, able to know everything, by that same token, it would understand nothing.
Understanding science as a relational enterprise is an ideal setup for the eclipse theme as defined earlier as relational event, while considering soft matter practices as one example for the immersion of viewers into the objects that the conscious observers observe, and for distinguishing the familiar and the understood. Now, one interesting fact about total eclipses is that the eclipse is understood, but not familiar. While the Impressionist painting is a case where we need to step back, maybe part of the eclipse shock is that it almost feels like the cosmos somehow steps back from us into the distant encounter between sun and moon. So back to 2017, when Tom fulfilled his lifelong dream of seeing the solar corona during a total solar eclipse. So this is Tom on North Yorkshire Radio reporting up on his return. And thanks to Craig Lomas, we can play this personal account with our own combined eclipse visuals.
And it has a personal, this is very personal for me because I spent my August doing some university work in America, and I drove myself a 6-hour road trip from University of Notre Dame, South Bend, down to Kentucky on the track of the total solar eclipse, and I saw my first total solar eclipse. I saw the solar corona that gave us this wonderful Northern Lights show, and it was one of the most beautiful, moving sights of my life.
You lucky man! I am full of jealousy, full of envy for having seen that. So, how long were you sort of blacked out? Because it was the maximum was about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, we got 2 minutes 20 seconds. They were the shortest 2 minutes 20 seconds of my entire life.
But you heard the birds fall silent.
The birds were silent, and the crickets were the funniest thing. Crickets all started up, right? Chirp, 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 chirp. Then 2 minutes later, of course, night over. It was chirp, chirp.
Oh,
all right, lads. That was a bit short. Okay, shut up, lads. That was a bit of a mistake.
Wow.
Went back to
what about the reaction of people? What about the reaction of human beings around you?
Well, what happened was, and the NASA spokesman said this would happen. It's true because the sun blacks out and the sky goes dark. The sky disappears, goes black, and the stars come out. And around the sun, you see this blackest thing you've never seen any blackness like this before, with the moon covering the sun. This beautiful solar corona appears, and everyone goes, "Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my!" Oh, and then everyone goes silent because it is so beautiful. Everyone is just stunned.
And then you get this phenomenon called the diamond ring.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Where the moon we've just moved that little bit.
The first little bit, your eyes get dark adapted, and then as the first tiny bit of the sun's surface comes back into view through a lunar valley on the trailing edge of the moon, this searing flash comes out at the edge of a ring, which is the inner corona. I've seen pictures for decades, but no photograph can do justice to
a life changer. You lucky man.
Okay, so
Northern Lights, heavenly phenomenon, eclipses, and all the rest. Closer to planet Earth, what have we got?
Close to planet Earth, we've got sheep rustlers back in North Yorkshire and Lancashire.
Oh dear.
Oh yes.
The sheep rustlers. Just one example of how quickly Tom could navigate celestial and earthly matters at the drop of a hat. Now, on to our final stop, Revelation. And Eclipse and Revelation was published as planned prior to the eclipse in 2024, with lots of chapters grappling with the issue of eclipse representation and the impossibility of communicating the experience. So let's listen to Tom quoting one of his favorite commentaries on art, matter, and communication.
Let's go to a master of literature and the arts. If anyone has not read Real Presences, it's a gorgeous book by late modern master of arts and letters, George Steiner, held chairs in, I think, Switzerland, Britain, America, and France at one point simultaneously. In this wonderful book, Real Presences, which is his reflection on postmodernism and for him the pain of the way that the humanities have broken the contract of meaning between word and text and reality. He writes this, he says, only art can go some way towards making accessible, towards waking into some measure of communicability, the sheer inhuman otherness of matter. Long sentence, long words, but can you see what he's saying? I will never forget the night I first read this, because through my life as a scientist, a young scientist, I realized I'd had an internal question, which is the question of what is science for? And now I don't mean I wasn't looking for answers. Well, it helps us invent new things, it discovers new things. Yes, well, I know all that. But I want to know what it's for at a human level. I might have asked what music is for. And when I read that, I thought it's interesting that George Steiner could think of art, because what else is going to wake into some measure of communicability the sheer inhuman otherness of matter than science? That's what science does. So I felt that I was onto a scent of this healthy human narrative for what science could do for us.
And Tom had more to say about communicability as part of the core human quest of understanding what it means to be human in the world, and about how it can, should, must be communicated across disciplines and beyond the university.
When we're all around the table, all looking with our co-equal expertise and gifts we can bring to this, I think we all get the experience we're rediscovering where the core, if you like, or the foundation of academic life is all about. How really there's only one quest, there's only one unified goal: to think through what it means to be human, what it means to live in this world, what it means to discover the extraordinary human aptitude and to use it, of delving beneath the subject of the world around, the structure of the world around us. It's a unified task, and we all have a part to play. And for me, the great richness of that is discovering the unity of academic life, and also how that isn't isolated like some sort of ivory tower bubble, that everyone gets excited by this.
Totality creates a curious change in visual perception, making the apparent size of the sun appear much larger than it is. The eclipsed sun occupies an angle of just 1/2 a degree across the sky. That's the width of a finger held at arm's length. Yet, seen as a hole in the sky, in the center of the unworldly corona, it fixes the attention so that the entire spectacle seems to fill the beholder's field of view. And here the theme of healing comes back. When else do we experience to be in full, inescapable relationship with nature as primarily as when we stand in the path of totality and the giant shadow runs across the land towards us, cools and darkens earth around us, and makes us so suddenly so much more aware of our life-giving star, the sun, as it is being switched off and then on again. And so it was April 8th on a field at a horse ranch outside Waco, Texas. At this point, special thanks to Dr. Michael Lancaster from the Derby and District Astronomical Society, with whom I saw the eclipse and who took these extraordinary photos. And here you see also the lovely red prominence that we could observe during totality. And this was a generous eclipse, 4 minutes and 13 seconds, the corona visible the entire time with just a few picturesque high clouds, as you can see here, and they really filtered the light in a very interesting way. So after the corona, there's the diamond ring. We saw that too. And we could see the following partial phases, the end of the eclipse. But it wasn't so clear that we could see it actually up to the minutes of totality. And it was rather nerve-wracking. So if you followed the April eclipse, you will have heard that weather predictions dramatically changed in the lead up to April 8th. And this made for a stressful, anxious wait for us in Texas. And many other parts of Texas were disappointed as thick carpets of clouds insulated them from the view of the corona. And they might have felt that it got darker and cooler, but they would not have been able in some places to see this spectacle. Now, as a safety measure, luckily, Tom and I had put something in the book that for any scenario provides some consolation, we hope. We came to think that if attention and awe have been excited through something rare and wonderful like Eclipse Day, it is actually on us to bring the same energy into our everyday life and appreciate the sky, the sun and the moon more on any cloudy or bright day. And this is the final excerpt that I will read from our book. It's about attention and awe. Attention is easy to pay once one realizes that the stars are always there, just at times more, at times less visible, in the quotidian appearance of the cosmos on any unremarkable day and night. This thought alone alerts one to a numinous quality of the cosmos, independent from something as rare as the total solar eclipse. Then attention can result in awe on any unspectacular day of any weather. The goal, therefore, for the long periods of time between eclipses, seems to be the development of a fine-tuned perception for moments of subtle breakthrough, much like the moon in the afternoon, luna del pomeriggio, when it appears as almost transparent in a memorable passage from Italo Calvino's Palomar. Nobody looks at the moon in the afternoon, and this is the moment when it should most require our attention, since its existence is still in doubt. It is a whitish shadow that surfaces from the intense blue of the sky, charged with solar light. Who can assure us that, once again, it will succeed in assuming form and glow? It is so fragile and pale and slender. Only on one side does it begin to assume a distinct outline like the arc of a sickle, while the rest is steeped in azure. It is like a transparent wafer or half-dissolved pastel. Only here the white circle is not dissolving, but condensing, collecting itself at the price of grey, bluish patches and shadows that might belong to the moon's geography, or might be spillings of the sky that still soak the satellite, porous as a sponge. Tom loved the science play Arcadia by Tom Stoppard, and while a set of Arcadia epigraphs structures my chapter on eclipse representation in art and literature, I want to close here with one quote that is not featured in the book, but that seems to be ideal for this occasion, as it is a hopeful commentary on the lost knowledge of the world. It comes from a conversation of a young student, Thomasina, and her tutor Septimus, about her grief considering the great loss of ancient works, such as in the burning of the Great Library of Alexandria. So Thomasina exclaims, "Oh, Septimus, can you bear it? All the lost plays of the Athenians, 200 at least by Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, thousands of poems, Aristotle's own library. How can we sleep for grief?" And Septimus responds, "By counting our stock. 7 plays from Aeschylus, 7 from Sophocles, 19 from Euripides. My lady, you should no more grieve for the rest than for a buckle lost from your first shoe, or for your lesson book, which will be lost when you are old. We shed as we pick up, like travelers who must carry everything in their arms, and what we let fall will be picked up by those behind. The procession is very long, and life is very short. We die on the march, but there is nothing outside the march, so nothing can be lost to it. The missing plays of Sophocles will turn up piece by piece, or be written again in another language. Ancient cures for diseases will reveal themselves once more. Mathematical discoveries, glimpsed and lost to view, will have their time again." With this, we are at the end of Tom's Eclipse book publication, but also just at the beginning. as the recording of the audiobook is scheduled to take place in August, and as our authors team, students, family, friends, Eclipse followers are going to continue many of the conversations that Tom inspired us to start. Thank you.
Well, that was wonderful. I'm so grateful to Professor Lange for putting together that collection. It is wonderful to hear Tom's voice at the festival again. It's wonderful to feel his presence there with us. So I'd like to welcome back now Professor Lange, who is, as I think I mentioned at the start, she is Professor of the History of Art and of Italian Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. And she and Tom together put together the book that we're focusing this part of the discussion on now. So the book is the Eclipse and Revelation, Total Solar Eclipses in Science, History, Literature and the Arts. It was published by Oxford University Press in both the United States and the UK earlier this year, and the timing is important because Tom was very keen to make sure that the book was published in time for this year's total solar eclipse, which, as we know, was seen in the United States on April the 8th. And as I believe Henrike has just mentioned to me, many of the eclipse watchers were lucky enough to actually have a copy of the book, either the physical copy or the Kindle copy, in their hand as they actually watched this. It's intriguing to think about what Tom himself would have done with this for this year's Festival of Ideas on the back of the Eclipse and Revelation book. I know he would have organised another day-long event, as he's done in previous years. And I can only begin to imagine how wonderful that would have been. But Henrike, can I turn this over to you now and basically ask what do you think? I mean, you know the book much more intimately than anybody other than Tom. What do you think he would have done with it for the Festival of Ideas?
Yes, it's an excellent question, and of course, the hardest question, because we all miss him so much, and we would have wanted to have that happen. But again, the book was always a way in which that could still happen for all of the readers, in future, and for festival days, eclipse days that are not York Festival days or eclipse days for the rest of the world, but you can always take out the book and open it and find something there. I mean, we talk about the different chapters of the book as doors along a corridor of interdisciplinarity, and we wanted to have readers have this opportunity to read it also, either cover to cover. You can read it that way. It's structured that way. That's should also be satisfying. But you can also just jump from chapter to chapter, and that's what many of the readers I got feedback from so far have said they're doing, that they're being drawn in by many of the photos, for instance, or the images, and then they start reading certain places, they get some of the cross references to the other chapters, and they jump over to the next. And so I think the one consolation is that a book as an object is something where we have deposited this ideal of interdisciplinarity and kind of discovery, in a way that it still will open up these doors. Is also going to work, so hopefully, with these chapter bridges that we composed for each of the chapters, to have smooth transition between all those different disciplines that are represented in the book. So there's a short glossary with the technical terms or most important historical figures that come in front of the different chapters, but there's also a short introduction that basically brings the reader from the previous chapter to the next, and it's always a bit of pivoting for most of the chapters, because we have that many different disciplines. And it was also such an exciting experience for all the authors on the team to be all very seasoned interdisciplinary thinkers, experts in all their disciplines themselves, but still, there is not one reader who can be an expert in all of the disciplines bound together in this book. And so that was also, both humbling and community building for everyone, and to entertain these conversations between the sciences, history, arts and humanities, theology. And I think Tom would have just tried to invite, all of our authors. Obviously, we wanted to have, more authors workshops anyway that were cancelled by the pandemic. So we probably would have reconvened around the York Festival of Ideas, and then he would have brought in local representatives of the different, arts and sciences.
I wonder though, there's. I think I mentioned earlier, there's the one place I never actually saw Tom kind of working at for the festival was we often got something we call the Discovery Zone, where basically people set up either experiments or they set up kind of practical encounters with aspects of their work and aspects of their ideas. And I never saw Tom doing anything in the discoveries. I might be wrong, I might just have missed it. Which seems odd because, of course, Tom was also the chair of the Education Committee for the Royal Society, and was absolutely passionately committed to increasing the kind of representation of science in schools, and kind of trying to change the way that people thought about science. I mean, one of the reasons why he wrote his book on creativity was because he was so frustrated by encountering school children who basically said, "Oh, I don't want to do science, it's boring." And Tom was like, "Well, it's not. This is the most exciting kind of." So I think you were mentioning, I mean, I know I've seen kind of like glimpses of the book, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful in terms of all of the illustrations that you've actually got there. But haven't you also got kind of like experiments that can be done?
Yes, this is actually in the chapter bridge for the first chapter, and I think this is exactly what Tom would have done this year in the Discovery Corner in York, because he did do things like that for the rainbow when that was the big topic. He had a big meteorological topic before the eclipse, and there was the rainbow in Grosseteste and in medieval science. So the Ordered Universe project has a lot of emphasis on that, and they did practical experiments there with water and glass cubes and things like that. So here we have a practical note in the chapter bridge to chapter 1 that says, "It is well worth reading this chapter alongside a simple household experiment with a light bulb in a darkened room. Cast the shadow of a small sphere, such as a ping pong ball representing the moon, onto a larger sphere representing the Earth by a diffuse light source representing the sun." And so this is the kind of thing we certainly would have had we talked about pinhole cameras. We could have had a little corner where people could share, eclipse photos that they might have taken, because I happened to be on a trip, in the Texas trip was actually with a lot of people from the UK. So we would have had, that opportunity. We probably would have brought in Mike Frost from that context, around the book launch that we had in London. So we could have had maybe some of those objects that we had in our exhibitions in London and here in Berkeley. And the US launch we had here also was with a practical component, which was a little competition where people could submit eclipse drawings or any kind of representation on a small piece of paper, and they would get eclipse glasses if they submitted something. And it was incredibly interesting, to see what people came up with. And of course, for Tom and I in Eclipse and Revelation, it was so important to think about the representation, the impossibility of representation of eclipses, because that's part of this core issue of the communicability of matter, art, science, experience. But then, we want to always aim at communicating it, because the sharing of discovery and the academy really as a community and not as a solo trip is so important. And that was so vibrantly visible in Tom's work with students and school children.
Yeah.
And the Eclipse book, in a lot of ways, was supposed to not just open doors for the general public and really show a bit of behind the scenes look into the life of professors, researchers doing this kind of work, and was much more so to have younger readers maybe consider that that's something they could do in their lives, and they could become maybe someone researching any of these parts of the book, but also to have the science readers open up to the possibility of having an artistic perspective and vice versa. And that's really the feedback we got from our authors throughout the years also. That was so
Isn't that part of the reason for choosing the book cover as well? The cover that you've chosen for the book. I don't know whether or not we can hold it up and you can show it to the...
So on the cover we have Paul Nash's Eclipse of the Sunflower. We have it actually also on the spine there in a miniature version, so it's hopefully now shining out of lots of bookshelves. And we decided on this because Tom's idea, I had, as the art historian on the team, I had several ideas and submitted them to him. This, of course, because it's a British painter, 1940s, it seemed to be a nice choice, and many thanks also to the British Council Collection for giving us the rights to use this image. We have the watercolor version of this, and then the final finished oil painting also as the image for today's event, for the program. And one reason for this was that Tom said, well, we don't want a boring cover. We want something that is very unique. And so we didn't want to have another of the, just Corona photos. I will say we have so many of them in the book, so we love them just as much. But Tom didn't want to have a boring cover. And so we came up with this rather unusual choice. There's actually the full image here also inside, where you can see that the stem of the sunflower has collapsed and is on the bottom of the image, and the sunflower itself has risen and has this wonderful moment just before eclipsing, and we have the brighter light on one side, the more golden light on the other, and so there's just a lot of visual drama and excitement in that. And so this vibrancy and the way in which there we have also an art history image that also is involved with science and is in a historical image also. It has just enough layers, we thought, to represent the project.
I really liked it because for the project that I was working with Tom on, and I'm still working on now, the project's called Equipping Christian Leadership in an Age of Science. And if you Google the website, what you'll see is the images that we have there, like your sunflower, they represent a connection between the heavens and the physical earth. So we've got kind of like the stained glass window of York Minster and the kind of the sphere of the earth, and we've got the kind of the dandelion and all kinds of other images. And Tom really liked those. Tom really wanted those because, again, they reflect the connection between heaven and earth, the literal connection as well as the metaphorical and the spiritual connection. What I really like about that sunflower image is that it really encapsulates the kind of the down-to-earth beauty of science that was really important to Tom. It's another one of the ways in which he was so successful at getting people to understand that science isn't something that happens out there in the clouds. It's not something that's performed by kind of, strange creatures with huge brains and, with test tubes going clank, clank. It's wonderful. It encapsulates the human condition, and it enables people to, I'm trying to avoid saying make the world a better place because that sounds very twee and Tom would hit me. I can actually feel him hitting me as I'm saying it. But the kind of idea that I'm trying to get at there. And I really like the point that you were trying to draw out in the talk about science as a relational exercise and the eclipse as a relational event there. I thought that was that was a really important point to make in the context of Tom's work.
Yes, and it was definitely something that we experienced around the 2017 eclipse, and then in 2024 even more so, that in this country there were so many more people in the path of totality, so it was easier for many more people to experience totality during the eclipse. Much larger population on that track this year, and what we could once again experience is that there is an almost magical paradoxical engagement of the part of the experience that are individual and those that are collective, that we are standing shoulder to shoulder, and there is this huge energy, and this shadow falls over Earth and everyone who happens to find themselves in that location. And then if you are in a small group or in a larger group, but you usually are there in some sort of community with others, and so it is a collective experience. At the same time, everyone as an individual brings in their own emotions, their own relationship to the cosmos, to the world, to the others around them. And so that's a part of what makes the eclipse experience so hard to describe. And one of the chapters, the music chapter, of course, is called When Words Fail. It's I've worked on this now for over 7 years. I'm still struggling to describe exactly what that experience was like. And that's the it's many words that we're using in that book to getting to the point of saying that there are eclipsed part of this experience, but they are there. And so we are able then, as we tried through the different disciplines, to always get a description for certain parts and aspects of the experience, to get that right, and to actually then be able, as a scientist or as a historian, as an art historian, or as an artist, or as a writer, or as a musician, to say, for this part, this facet, this aspect of the experience, this is the truthful representation. And then when you put many of those together, and you have this fan of experience, then, but it can't be just one single person. It's really this collective, beautiful work. And I think that's what was so exciting for Tom and I to dedicate these years to this work.
Yeah, one person can't make science, and indeed humanity can't make science in that sense. One of the things that I loved about Tom's own account that you gave us was his imitation of a cricket, going, what just happened? It's not just the silence that falls over humanity, it's the community of all living beings as this event occurs. On that note, can I again offer my most profound gratitude and thanks to you, Professor Henrike Lange from the University of California at Berkeley. You've given us a wonderful thing. As a former colleague of Tom's, I'm personally very, very grateful, and I'm very thankful for your time. And my thanks to the audience for listening to this as well. Thank you.